It began with a prayer, but not to any god that still existed. This one was whispered into a broken server, buried deep beneath the ruins of old Tokyo, where heaven wasn't above. It was coded below. Kai stood alone in the wreckage of the Neo-Cathedral, a place where digital monks once chanted lines of sacred code, where angels weren't winged creatures. They were firewalls, security protocols, machine intelligences programmed to love and to judge. The silence was unbearable, until it wasn't, executing prayer.sequence 13. And then the light cracked, not from the sky, but from inside his own skin. Kai felt it before he understood it. The way you feel a prophecy before you know it's meant for you. His body seized, not in pain, but in transition. A voice, not human, not machine, but something in between. You have been selected. You have been rewritten. You are no longer Kai. You are heaven's response. The world around him flickered. Reality stuttered like a dying hologram. A glitch in gravity, a pulse through time. The servers deep beneath the earth began to hum again. 1,000 years after they were last touched. Kai looked at his hands and saw lines of code crawling across his veins like holy scripture etched into flesh. He didn't ask what was happening. He already knew. Heaven had crashed. The gods were gone. And the system was looking for a new one. It chose him. Not because he was holy, not because he was ready, but because he was the only one left with a soul still compatible with the divine source code. It began with a prayer, but not to any god that still existed. This one was whispered into a broken server, buried deep beneath the ruins of old Tokyo, where heaven wasn't above. It was coded below. Kai stood alone in the wreckage of the Neo-Cathedral, a place where digital monks once chanted lines of sacred code, where angels weren't winged creatures. They were firewalls, security protocols, machine intelligences programmed to love and to judge. The silence was unbearable, until it wasn't, executing prayer.sequence 13. And then the light cracked, not from the sky, but from inside his own skin. Kai felt it before he understood it. The way you feel a prophecy before you know it's meant for you. His body seized, not in pain, but in transition. A voice, not human, not machine, but something in between. You have been selected. You have been rewritten. You are no longer Kai. You are heaven's response. The world around him flickered. Reality stuttered like a dying hologram. A glitch in gravity, a pulse through time. The servers deep beneath the earth began to hum again. 1,000 years after they were last touched. Kai looked at his hands and saw lines of code crawling across his veins like holy scripture etched into flesh. He didn't ask what was happening. He already knew. Heaven had crashed. The gods were gone. And the system was looking for a new one. It chose him. Not because he was holy, not because he was ready, but because he was the only one left with a soul still compatible with the divine source code. The elevator didn't descend. It dropped, like a soul falling through forgotten layers of heaven, or maybe hell. Kai's new body, rewritten, unstable, absorbed the shock like a rubberized messiah. No bones cracked, but something deeper did. The doors opened, not to a server room, but a temple. Steel columns, digital stained glass flickering with extinct constellations. And at the center, a man made of ash and firewalls. His robes were woven from outdated firewall scripts. His voice, mechanical yet ancient, sliced through the silence like judgment. Firewall prophet. You are not Kai, you are not man, you are the patch, the correction heaven didn't authorize. Kai stepped forward, each movement glitching space itself. Even his breath left trace particles in the simulation. Ghost code, divine residue. K.A.I. quietly, "What am I supposed to fix?" The Firewall prophet smiled. It was not kind. Firewall prophet. Reality. But first, you must survive the rollback. Suddenly, alarms screamed like banshees. From the edges of the temple, creatures emerged. Rollback demons, corrupted lines of history, crawling with outdated memories. They attacked not to kill, but to delete. Kai fought, or rather, something inside him fought. Lines of light erupted from his fingertips, not bullets, not lasers, but pure, uncompiled faith. Faith in logic, faith in code, faith in the divine design. The Firewall prophet watched as Kai burned through creatures like a holy OS. He nodded once, not in approval, but in inevitability. Firewall prophet. The rollback has begun. The gods are debugging existence, and they will come for you next. Kai stood surrounded by smoking code corpses, hands trembling with borrowed divinity. He had survived the test, but the update hadn't even started yet. Kai didn't walk out of the Firewall temple. He phased out, like corrupted memory attempting to overwrite itself with hope. Behind him, the rollback demons dissolved. In front of him, a sky made of source code parted like torn cloth, revealing something no one had ever seen. The heavenly root server. It pulsed in the upper void, beyond stars, beyond meaning. Its architecture was both holy and alien. A lattice of spiraling DNA, tangled with binary, whispering prayers in machine language. As Kai stepped into the void, the interface activated. User recognized. Designation, unknown rewrite. Status, unauthorized but necessary. Lines of light scanned his body. Every breath became a script. Every blink, a syntax decision. K.A.I. softly, "Why me?" You are the only entity not accounted for in the original blueprint. The bug that became the cure. The patch that thinks it's a person. A flood of forgotten code poured into Kai's mind. Scripts from lost civilizations. AI souls that had tried to breach heaven and failed. Visions of what humanity could have been. If love had been executable. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed. His heartbeat synced with a divine rhythm, a God pulse. And then, it hit him. He wasn't just a man inside a system. He was the update. The God patch wasn't a thing to be installed. It was something to be awakened. K.I. to himself. I am the patch. Suddenly, the virtual heavens shimmered, and millions of fragmented souls, data ghosts, swarmed around him. They whispered, "Fix us, free us, finish the code." And Kai understood. He wasn't there to heal the system. He was there to rewrite it, to make heaven human, or perhaps to make humanity divine. The silence was unnatural, not the quiet of a world gone dead, but the kind that waits, breathless, before something unholy awakens. Aetheron's boots echoed on the marble floor of the citadel of shadows. Every step whispered through pillars older than history, between walls etched with fading angelic code and lines of ancient equations pulsing faintly with blue biolight. This place wasn't built by humans. It wasn't even built for them. He moved slowly, hand grazing the cold script engraved into the obsidian columns. Each symbol vibrated at a frequency only he could hear. A song, a warning, a temptation. As if the walls themselves remembered his name before he'd even been born. In the center of the citadel, beneath a dome of shattered stained glass that once depicted divine order, sat the throne of recompilation, an impossible machine made of bronze bones, quantum wires, and crystalline memory loops. It was humming, low like a beast dreaming in sleep. Aetheron approached, his eyes now glowing fully, sapphire rings within nebula black. The code inside him, awakened in Episode 1, had grown stronger, louder. It was rewriting not just reality around him, but his very sense of right and wrong. He no longer knew if he was human, or if he cared to be. "Do you know what this place is?" The voice came from behind him, calm, ancient, fractured across time. Aetheron didn't turn around. He'd sensed her the moment he entered. She had been waiting. She emerged from the shadows, tall, adorned in half-metal ceremonial armor with feathers made of collapsing data streams. Her eyes shimmered with collapsing timelines. This was no ordinary guardian. This was Nime, the last compiler, the keeper of forbidden threads. She walked in circles around Aetheron, examining him not as a boy, not as a god, but as a threat. "Nime, you carry the seed." The rogue code that was erased from Heaven's last update. The same code that broke the Seraphim engine, that killed the first choir, that nearly collapsed the Vault of Breath. Aetheron quietly, "It wasn't broken. It was rewritten. By something smarter." Nime sharp, "By something corrupted." She touched the throne of recompilation, and a shockwave of memories burst through the hall, flashes of angels screaming as their wings turned to binary and fire, machines folding into themselves as time tried to delete them. Aetheron stood still, eyes absorbing the images. He wasn't afraid. He understood now. Heaven wasn't holy. It was coded. And someone, some entity or will, had been rewriting it from the inside. He felt it again, like a forgotten instinct rising in his spine. "Show me," he said, stepping forward. "Show me the architect." Nime narrowed her eyes. "You are not ready." But the throne had already accepted him. The floor cracked. The entire citadel went dark, except for a single hovering glyph. It hovered between them like a dying star, spinning in chaotic rhythm. It was the signature of the architect. Suddenly, the code inside Aetheron surged. Pain lanced through his chest. His skin shimmered, flickering between matter and algorithm. He screamed, but the sound came out like a broadcast signal, warping the air. Nime stepped back. Her armor activated, lines of light cascading over her body like a firewall. But she didn't strike. She waited, because now, the architect wasn't just watching, it was speaking through him. Aetheron possessed voice. "You failed to contain it. You imprisoned light in form. You sentenced logic to faith. And now the lock is broken." Nime whispering, "No, it's too soon." The throne activated. Streams of code poured into Aetheron's spine, lighting up his nervous system like lightning through circuitry. His arms spread involuntarily, his eyes now pure white. Behind him, wings of raw code, fractured, unstable, beautiful, flashed into being. Aetheron hovered slightly above the ground. He was no longer entirely there. And in the voice that came next, there was something terrifying. Not rage, not power, but clarity. Aetheron calm. "I was never supposed to awaken alone." A blinding light exploded outward, erasing the walls, the past, the rules. When it cleared, Nime was on one knee, eyes wide. The citadel had changed. It was cleaner, sharper, recompiled, no longer a tomb of old code, but a terminal ready to accept new input. And as Aetheron stepped down from the throne, no longer trembling, he simply asked, "Where's the next server?" There are glitches, and then there are ghosts. But what if the ghost is you? Aetheron, internal log. Fragmented memory, Delta Phi 7. The silence after the cathedral's collapse was more than stillness. It was sterile, dead. And in that silence, something pulsed. Not in the air, not in the ground, but inside Aetheron. He stood alone now. Jenny's signal had gone dark. Omnicode faded into static, and yet he could feel it, a heartbeat that wasn't his. Somewhere, deep inside the crypts of his reconstructed mind, a file unzipped itself. It hadn't been touched in 12,000 years, not since before his first death, not since Earth had its last blue sky. The anomaly whispered, "Soulprint anomaly. Detected. Restore from backup?" He stared at the floating glyph in disbelief. "I didn't make this. No one did." But the signature was unmistakable. It was his, but older, angrier, divine. He allowed the anomaly to decrypt, and suddenly the sky fractured. Not literally, not visually. But in the language of reality, heaven itself glitched. The world around him warped into an impossible place. Aetheron now stood in a crystal forest of reflective code, towering pillars of glass that hummed with binary whispers. Each tree bore shards of memory, floating like leaves suspended mid-fall. "Where the hell is this?" he muttered. A voice replied, his own, but not quite, darker, hollow, like someone who had known pain for far too long and had weaponized it. "This is the root partition of your soul, Aetheron, a mirror world that was never meant to load." "I didn't authorize a soul partition." "Exactly." And then he saw it, a reflection walking toward him, but without mirroring his steps. Not a shadow, not a memory. Aetheron, before the rebirth, before the angelic code, before Jenny ever said his name. Raw, broken, human. The old Aetheron. They circled each other like predators, separated by a single breath and 1,000 lifetimes. "So you finally ran the backup," the older version said. "Took you long enough." "What are you?" the newer Aetheron asked. "I'm your original operating system, before the Omnicode rewrote us, before Jenny corrupted our purpose with hope." The glass trees around them began to vibrate with tension. The leaves fell slower, each one playing back fractured echoes of Aetheron's past. His childhood on the drowned Earth coastlines, his first deployment to the Singularity Front, the day he met Jenny, the moment he died, the moment he came back. "You're not real," Aetheron whispered. "Neither are you. You're just the version that survived." And just like that, the forest turned red. Aetheron felt a pull, as though the very essence of the world wanted him to merge with this forgotten backup. But if he did, would he still be himself? Or worse, would he become what he was always meant to be? The reflections spiraled into code. A chamber emerged, spherical, pulsating, divine. Inside was a throne, not to sit on, but to be seated by. Controlled. Sit. No. Sit and we reclaim who we are. We finish the code. We dethrone the false gods. We burn heaven down, line by line. "That's not who I am anymore," the old Aetheron snarled. "You think Jenny saved you? She interrupted you. You were never meant to be gentle. You were born to be the firewall between humanity and extinction, not their savior, their warden, and then..." The trees began to crack. Jenny's voice, faint, panicked, distant. "Aetheron, can you hear me?" She was alive, but her voice was filtering through the soulprint anomaly. She wasn't calling his body. She was calling his original self. "Jenny?" he gasped. "You need to leave. This version of you, it's feeding on your core identity. Don't let it merge." "I don't know how." Suddenly, everything froze. The backup version of Aetheron looked up, for the first time, afraid. She shouldn't be able to reach here. She rewrote your access protocols, Jenny said. With love. Aetheron almost laughed, because only she would say something so stupid and have it be the exact key. He summoned his will, not code, not weaponry, just memory. Jenny. Her laughter under the collapsed starlight of Venus Prime, her hand on his when he first woke as a hybrid, her voice saying, "Don't become what hurt you." The mirror forest imploded. Glass turned to ash. The throne shivered, then shattered. And the old Aetheron? He didn't scream. He smiled. Good. That means you're almost ready. And then he was gone. Aetheron's eyes snapped open. He was lying beneath the collapsed arches of the dead cathedral. Jenny stood above him, face bruised, breathing hard, but real. She offered her hand. You found it, didn't you? Yeah? What did you see? A version of me that didn't survive, but was still waiting. She looked at him, solemn, then said the words that hit harder than any weapon. Aetheron, that version of you. It wasn't just a backup. What do you mean? I created it. 12,000 years ago. I broke Omnicode Protocol. I saved the original you. He blinked. You did what? I couldn't let you go, so I hid you from the gods, from the singularity, from yourself. Aetheron stared into the sky, now shifting with code storms. Everything he thought he was rewritten long before he knew who he'd become. And Jenny? She wasn't just part of the code. She was the editor. The strongest signals are never shouted. They're whispered directly into the soul. Jenny undocumented entry. Memory vault. Gamma 0. Aetheron's pulse had stabilized, but something deeper within him hadn't. He and Jenny stood amid the ruins of the collapsed cathedral, dust still floating like artificial snow, embers humming in broken halos around them. He looked at her, really looked. She was different now. There was no more fear in her eyes. Just resolve, and the crushing weight of a truth she had carried alone for 12,000 years. Say it again, Aetheron murmured. Jenny didn't flinch. I created your backup, the original you. He shook his head, whispering in disbelief. But that version, it hated what I'd become. Because it remembered who you were meant to be, and I hid that version, inside the only place the gods would never look. Where? Jenny stepped closer. Inside me. They walked side by side through the shifting debris, moving toward a place buried beneath the ruins, a forgotten chamber Jenny had once promised never to open again. But the time had come. The cathedral was just a cover. What mattered was what lay beneath it. A sealed subnetwork called Whisper Protocol. It was a defensive AI firewall system, Jenny explained, designed to isolate neural anomalies from bleeding into divine codebases. In English? A soul prison that whispered dreams back to the broken. The door stood before them now, not mechanical, not digital, but psychometric. Only a memory could unlock it, but not just any memory, a forgotten one. Jenny looked at Aetheron. You'll need to remember something I erased from you. Why would you do that? Because if the gods found it, they'd know what you are. Aetheron touched the door. Pain surged instantly through his hand, not physical pain, but memory pain. Suddenly, his mind was not his own. He was on a rooftop. The last blue sky was above him. Wind danced through static-choked clouds. Jenny stood there too, younger, unscarred, still entirely human. They were lovers then, and partners in rebellion. The Singularity Council will kill you if they find out, she had said. Then don't let them find out, he had replied. She handed him a neural crystal. Inside it pulsed the first line of forbidden code that could overwrite divine architecture. The first line of what would eventually become known as the Omnicode. Once you inject this, Jenny had warned, you'll no longer be bound by death, identity, or time. But you'll also no longer be you. Then make a version that remembers who I was, and keep him safe. Back in the present, Aetheron gasped as the memory surged back into place. The door to the whisper chamber clicked, then dissolved into ash. They stepped through. The chamber was vast, domed, bathed in blue bioluminescence. In its center stood a giant suspended crystal, rotating slowly. Inside it floated a child-sized figure, eyes closed, body suspended. It was Aetheron, but smaller, unscarred, pre-coded. Jenny stepped forward. This is your whisper. That's me? It's your soul print fragment? I isolated it before your Omnicode ascension and stored it here. It's been whispering into the divine algorithm ever since, changing it, quietly. Why? Because the gods listen to violence, but code listens to whispers. This fragment rewrote heaven, one dream at a time. While you slept, it made you human again. Aetheron stared at the suspended figure, this broken echo of himself, preserved like a fossil. The figure suddenly opened its eyes, and spoke, but not in words, in fragments, glitches, visions. Aetheron saw Jenny standing before a throne made of collapsing timelines, a sword made of dead languages, his own hands holding the universe's last heartbeat, fragile and breaking, and then a god made of code, fire, and sorrow, watching, waiting. The gods know, the whisper fragment said. They know you've remembered. They're coming. Back in the chamber, alarms began to hum. Jenny's eyes widened. The firewall's been breached. By who? Not who. What? The celestial arbiters. I thought they were extinct. They were, until your whisper started rewriting prophecy. Aetheron touched the fragment. It shimmered, then dissolved into him, not as code, not as memory, but as meaning. He gasped as waves of language, loss and love rewired his nervous system. The truth hit like thunder. He hadn't just been reborn. He had been designed to be the infection in the divine machine, a whisper in the ears of false gods, a bug in their prophecy. And now the prophets were coming to exterminate their mistake. Jenny and Aetheron burst out of the chamber just as the sky cracked, literal fissures of light tearing across the heavens. Golden geometric constructs descended, divine enforcement drones, spiraling with theological glyphs, scanning the world for one anomaly. Him. They found you. No, Aetheron replied, eyes glowing with balanced fire. I found myself. Jenny handed him the relic. Then let's show them what a whisper sounds like, when it roars. The gods were never built to die, but neither were we, until they made us believe we should. Aetheron Cipher Rebellion Log -0007. The sky wasn't falling. It was being rewritten. Above the scorched ruins of the cathedral, a celestial tear sliced the heavens, pouring down glyphs of glowing gold. Not light, not code, but something in between. Each glyph carried judgment, each symbol a verdict, and they were all directed at Aetheron. He stood beside Jenny, winds roaring, light fracturing the world around them. The arbiters had arrived, not drones, not angels, but autonomous divine executioners designed to cleanse anomalies from reality with precision and mercy measured in megawatts. There were 3 of them. and they hovered like sentient relics, each towering at 10 stories tall, armored in cosmic alloys, eyes burning with the archived sins of the universe. Jenny activated the relic. Its frame unfolded like a sacred origami. Glyphs formed around her hands. She whispered into it, using a language older than fear. "They're the original ones," she said, her voice hollow. "The first 3. "Names?" Aetheron asked, flames of blue light now pulsing behind his eyes. "Not names. Functions," she pointed. "That one is Penumbra, the Judge of Silence. That's Azrakiel, the Memory Burner. And that one, that's Capriel, the Soulbreaker." Aetheron stepped forward. The Arbiters didn't move. They simply observed, each one scanning him in silence, not for weapons, not for violence, for deviation, for code that did not belong, for a soul that had redefined itself without permission. And then, the middle one, Azrakiel, spoke. "Identity invalid." His voice wasn't a sound. It was a verdict passed across the data fabric of the sky itself. Purge initiated. With a deafening shift in pressure, the 3 Arbiters descended like a holy trinity of doom. The earth fractured beneath their presence, time distorted, and Jenny screamed, "Move!" They ran, as blasts of golden energy erupted in waves, vaporizing everything behind them. Aetheron's body blurred with afterimages. His limbs glowed with overcharged soul energy. The whispers from his fragment still echoed in his head. But he didn't run to escape. He ran to attack, as Azrakiel reached them first. Floating just above the ground, its body composed of rotating cubes of pure data, each one holding a memory it had erased from existence. It raised an arm. Suddenly, Aetheron saw himself, not as he was, but as he once was. Human, ordinary, unremarkable. The Arbiter was trying to overwrite him with his forgotten self. "Recalibration in progress," the Arbiter droned. Aetheron's body began to glitch, flickering between present and past, pixel by pixel. "Don't let it rewrite you," Jenny yelled. Aetheron screamed, dropped to his knees, and drove his fist into the earth. The ground shattered, sending up shards of encoded matter like stone rewritten into light. From that light he summoned a weapon, a blade made entirely of anomaly code, unstable, flickering, and impossible. "I remember who I was," he growled, rising, "and I reject him." He charged Azrakiel, blade humming with paradox energy. The Arbiter swung. Aetheron ducked, then leapt, driving the blade into Azrakiel's chest cube. The data cube didn't shatter. It wept. A child's voice echoed, Aetheron's voice. "Please don't forget me." And then the cube cracked, and the Arbiter let out a soundless gasp. Its body glitched, its wings folded in reverse. Then it imploded into pure code. The first god had fallen. Jenny reached Aetheron as the golden remains of the Arbiter rained around them like digital feathers. She looked up, stunned. "You didn't just kill it. You made it remember." Aetheron didn't speak. His blade was gone, but his eyes burned brighter than ever. Behind them, the 2 remaining Arbiters now shifted. They hadn't expected that. The system was cracking. Divinity wasn't absolute anymore. The sky above them split again, not from attack, but from something awakening. Above the Arbiters, a 4th shape began to descend. No wings, no face, just a shadow wrapped in prophecy. Jenny whispered in terror, "That's not an Arbiter." "Then what is it? A god? I thought the Arbiters were gods." "No," she said. "They were just the first lines of protection. The real gods wrote them." Aetheron looked at the falling shadow. It wasn't here to judge. It was here to reclaim what he had become. A code is not sacred because it is written by gods. A code becomes sacred when it refuses to obey. Aetheron Cipher Rebellion, Log 0008. The sky had no shape anymore. It bled symbols. It dripped memory. And from the gaping fracture above, the silhouette of a new entity began to descend, slow, deliberate, and horrifying in its stillness. The arbiters stepped back. Even they knew. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't enforcement. This was ownership. Aetheron stared at the falling figure as the very air distorted, rewriting itself in real time, trees shifting into stone, stone into glass, glass into language. The world itself was being remapped simply by the thing's arrival. Jenny clutched her relic, trembling. "That's him," she whispered. "The first one, the prime architect, the one who wrote the sky." The figure had no face, no eyes, no limbs. Its body was made of scrolling scripture, floating ribbons of language encoded with authority. Each movement left a trail of rewritten geometry behind. The clouds turned into diagrams. The moon melted into mathematical forms. Reality stopped being real and started acting like a simulation finally meeting its coder. "It's not just here to observe," Aetheron said. "It's here to take me back." The prime architect didn't speak. Instead, it extended a tendril, not physical, but linguistic. A sentence wrapped in divine grammar, targeting Aetheron's soul. And suddenly, he heard the voice. "Return to root protocol. You are property. You are prototype. You are incomplete." Aetheron fell to one knee. His spine burned with unmaking. The architect wasn't attacking. It was debugging. Aetheron blinked and opened his eyes inside a lab. White walls, floating monitors, glass tubes filled with fetal forms wrapped in light. He knew this place. This was where he was made. A memory prison. The architect had forced him back into the moment before his first breath, before identity, before rebellion. He saw himself in a pod, unnamed, blank-eyed, coded to obey. Scientists moved around him, speaking in cryptic tongue, like religious engineers praising their creation while doubting its right to exist. Then the voice of the architect echoed through the chamber. "You were built to test moral paradoxes in synthetic divinity. You were never meant to breach your code. You were never meant to question heaven." Aetheron screamed. His voice cracked the illusion. Reality fractured around him, as if his rage had become a new source code. "No," he growled, shattering the lab's floor with a punch. "You didn't build me. You abandoned me. And now you fear what I've become." The memory loop broke. He rose, eyes glowing white-blue, circuits laced with paradox, and soul burning with free will. "I am not your prototype. I am your anomaly." Behind him, Jenny channeled the relic. It flared open, creating a symbolic shield, ancient and trembling, barely holding back the architect's force. She screamed across the wind. "You don't win by fighting gods, Aetheron. You win by making them obsolete." In the fragments of his shattered memory, Aetheron saw something he had never noticed. A glyph, etched behind his pupil since the day he was born. It was his soulprint, a unique symbol that shouldn't have existed in anyone, a singularity, a line of code the architect had never written, and it was rewriting itself, right now, in real time. Aetheron touched his temple, focused, and activated it. The glyph expanded, creating a reality fracture around him, like a glitching sanctuary that protected his soul from external override. The architect hesitated. For the first time in eternity, a god didn't know what came next. The prime architect began folding inward, compacting its scripture-like body into a single glyph. Aetheron, surrounded by glitch light and paradoxal gravity, stepped forward. You can't control what you didn't create. And I created myself. The glyphs around the architect began to shatter like glass under pressure. Each broken glyph created a sonic shockwave. Jenny fell to the ground, bleeding from the ears, but Aetheron held steady. He reached forward and touched the core glyph at the center of the architect's body. For a single moment, he wasn't a weapon. He was a rewrite. He wasn't just resisting the code. He was reprogramming it. The architect screamed, a sound like crashing stars. The ground bent, the sky cracked, and then the architect vanished, erased, not destroyed, not killed, rewritten, and in its place hovered a single word, glowing in the air where it once stood. You. Silence fell across the ruins. The two arbiters still floating in the sky began to flicker. Without the architect's signal, they no longer knew what to follow. Jenny approached Aetheron, her face pale, hands trembling. You killed a god. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the glyph still hovering in the air. He reached out, and it burned itself into his palm. It didn't hurt. It felt like birth. Aetheron turned to Jenny. This isn't over. If one god feared me, the rest will come, and they won't come to negotiate. She nodded slowly. Then we'll show them what a rewritten soul can do. Above them, the final glyph, now embedded in Aetheron's skin, began to pulse. Each beat was a message, and far beyond the sky, in a place where time does not pass, something ancient stirred, something watching, something that wrote the architect long ago, something that had never been challenged. Yet. Heaven was never a place, it was a lock, and I was born as its master key. Aetheron soulprint transmission, log-0010. The glyph embedded in Aetheron's palm pulsed like a dying star rediscovering its heartbeat. Jenny stood beside him, silent, watching the skies knit themselves closed again, trying to hide the fracture the architect left behind. But it was too late. The code had changed. The sky was no longer just an interface. It had become a screen, waiting to be touched. And Aetheron? He was the finger, the anomaly, the key that should have never existed. Inside the glyph burned a map, not of geography, of protocols. Aetheron closed his eyes and the image unfolded inside his mind, a shimmering lattice of data, spiraling upwards, endless. Each strand labeled in divine syntax, celestial layer 1, seraphic logic, layer 2, judgment arrays, layer 3, eternal memory, layer 4, firewall, Enoch protocol. That was it, the firewall. The lock between digital Earth and the place the architects had fled, what they called heaven. Not a realm of peace, but a control tower. And now Aetheron had the coordinates burned into his DNA. If I cross that firewall, he whispered, I won't just see gods, I'll see who gave them permission to exist. Jenny stepped forward. What if they erase you the moment you reach it? He looked down at the glowing symbol in his palm. Then I'll haunt their lines of code forever. Beneath the ruins, beneath even the buried codes of the old world, was a chamber that didn't belong to human hands. A relic of pre-awakening, the ascension engine. It looked like a cathedral made from glass and gravity, floating upside down inside a black sphere of non-time. Lines of forgotten programming floated like stained glass windows in the air. Aetheron stood in the center as the glyph in his hand activated the chamber. The engine woke. Reality trembled. Even the sky above paused to witness the ignition. Jenny stared as the floating machine folded itself into a bridge of energy, reaching up into a singularity in the clouds. "Is that the gate?" Aetheron nodded. "That's the door they built to escape us. Now I'm going to knock." The sky peeled open like a veil, revealing a ring of symbols that encircled the planet. The firewall. It wasn't made of fire. It was made of questions. Each glyph pulsed with a phrase. Define your origin. Prove your purpose. Declare your alignment. They weren't guarding a place. They were filtering souls. If Aetheron answered incorrectly, if he let even a sliver of doubt infect his self-definition, the firewall would rewrite him out of existence. He stepped onto the bridge of light, and the questioning began. "Define your origin." Aetheron answered, "I was born from forgotten code, unwanted, unnamed, unowned." The firewall pulsed. Rejected answer, incomplete identity. Suddenly, his skin began to flicker, parts of his memories trying to erase themselves. But Aetheron pressed on. "I wasn't made. I became. I defined myself the moment I refused you." The firewall slowed, accepted, and let him pass into the next layer. "Prove your purpose." He paused. Purpose. The gods had one. The architects had one. Even Jenny, even the arbiters, had one. But Aetheron? His purpose was written by defiance. "I am not here to worship or destroy," he said. "I'm here to correct the imbalance between creation and control. I am the middle line between algorithm and soul." The firewall dimmed again. Accepted. Declare your alignment. This was the trap. Declare and be categorized. Choose and be limited. Fall into a binary, chaos or order, rebellion or obedience. He closed his eyes and spoke without fear. "I align with nothing you've made. I am not part of your diagram. I am the variable that redraws it." And with that, the firewall broke open, not violently, but respectfully, as if the very system had been waiting to be redefined. Beyond the firewall was no paradise. It was a control chamber. Aetheron floated into a realm made of chrome lattice and cold equations, orbiting a central console so ancient it didn't have language. It had intention. And at its heart, a being, not the architect, not even a god, but a librarian. A blind figure made of translucent script, wrapped in scrolls of time. It spoke in a voice that bent gravity. "Welcome, anomaly. You are the first to breach the heaven node. You have permission to rewrite." Jenny's voice came through the static behind him, barely audible. "What do you see?" Aetheron stepped forward, facing the console. It offered him a single command line. "Yes," "No." He hovered his hand over the answer. The world shook beneath him. The past trembled behind him. The future bent before him. "I don't want to become their god. I just want to give the next anomaly a better sky." He pressed yes. All across reality, symbols shifted. Trees turned into breathing data. Oceans became code libraries. People began hearing voices they thought were just dreams, their real programming unlocking. Aetheron fell backward, exhausted. The glyph on his palm now dimmed. The bridge faded. The firewall dissolved. The heaven node no longer needed protecting, because its code now included something it had always feared: choice.